Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's Pick a Pile reading is all about a message that finds you when you're ready for it. There are 3 piles for you to choose from. From left to right we have piles 1, 2, and then 3. Once you have picked your pile, head to the timestamp for it in the description below. Hello pile 1, welcome to your reading. Let's jump right into it. This message begins with the powerful energy of inner turmoil. Mental conflict shows that something is pulling at you. Could be a decision, a pattern, or a memory that's becoming more exhausting to ignore than to face. There's a split in your mind, possibly between the truth you've been trying to access and the noise of fear or second guessing that clouds it. You may have been carrying the weight of what should I do or what if I'm wrong for longer than you've admitted. It feels like you've been mentally replaying something, hoping that clarity would come from repetition, but instead it's just brought fatigue. This card often appears when someone is right on the edge of personal truth, when you're close to alignment but still caught in the crossfire of old habits and emotional noise. There's a deeper part of you that already knows the answer. What's missing isn't the knowledge, it's the silence and space to finally let it speak. There's also an emotional disconnection that's been trying to resolve itself. You might feel stretched between logic and intuition, between the expectation others have of you and what you actually want for yourself. This message is arriving now because you're finally reaching a point where doing nothing feels harder than choosing a path. Mental conflict is a sign that your inner truth has been knocking, not loudly, but consistently. And this reading wants to meet you there in that quiet tension and guide you towards resolution, because once you release the spiral of indecision, there's something much softer and much more freeing waiting on the other side. This message isn't here to push you. It's here to affirm what you already feel but might not yet have named, that it's time to stop fighting what your heart already understands. This card marks the start of inner alignment. The High Priestess is your intuition, calm, quiet, and completely grounded in what's real. You've known something for a while, maybe not in a way you could put into words, but it's been living in your body, surfacing in dreams, and whispering through moments of stillness. And this message is finding you now because you're ready to trust that knowing. The High Priestess doesn't chase answers, she receives them. And that's what you're being invited to do. Not force clarity, but allow it. You're being shown that you already possess the insight you've been seeking. And while the external noise may have distracted you before, that internal compass is still strong, still intact, and still pointing you in the right direction. There's power in silence, and lately you may have been pushed into that stillness more often than you expected. Through burnout, emotional fatigue, or the sudden pause of something ending. These moments weren't empty. They were space being cleared for you to return to yourself and to listen again, and to also remember what you actually feel without all that interference. What's rising to the surface now is the truth you buried to keep the peace, the boundary you didn't set, the yes you didn't say, and the no you swallowed. And it's not here to shame you, it's here to be reclaimed. You are ready to reconnect with your own clarity, and this card is the reminder that your soul has never stopped guiding you. The High Priestess only speaks when you're ready to listen, and today you are. Here's where your confidence took a hit. The Queen of Wands reverse suggests that at some point in this story, whether in a connection, a decision, or a life shift, you started to question your own light. You may have been dimming yourself to make others more comfortable, second-guessing your instincts, or hiding your full self to avoid conflict. And now that disconnection is showing up as self-doubt. There's a sense here that you were once very sure of what you brought to the table. Your passion, your leadership, maybe your authenticity. These weren't up for debate, but something shook that. Someone's rejection, a loss of direction, or even repeated emotional letdowns may have chipped away at the belief that you had your own fire. This card doesn't come up to call you out. It's here to help you remember. You were never supposed to shrink in the presence of uncertainty. You were meant to root down, to let your strength adapt, but never vanish. And even if you spent time feeling overlooked or undervalued, that truth, the one where you are powerful, magnetic, and whole, hasn't gone anywhere. It's okay to have stepped back for a while. Healing takes retreat, but you're not meant to stay small. The part of you that once moved boldly, that created, that led, and that didn't wait for permission, is still in there, and now they're ready to return. You don't have to wait for external validation to reclaim your presence. You just have to stop believing the story that your power needs to be softened to be accepted. You've been through something that left a mark. The Ten of Swords reversed tells us you're in the recovery phase of an ending, one that may have felt brutal, exhausting, or deeply personal. This wasn't just a chapter closing, this was an identity collapse. And while you're beginning to rise, the scar tissues still ache sometimes. The reverse position here is important. It means you're healing, that even if the pain is still fresh in places, the worst of it is behind you. What's left is the work of releasing, of not carrying every disappointment, every betrayal, every I should have seen it coming into the future. Because this message is finding you exactly where you are, in the space between survival and new beginnings. There's nothing weak about needing time to process what happened. This wasn't just mental, it hit the emotional and spiritual layers too. And part of your healing has been untangling which pain was caused by others and which parts you internalized as your own fault. This card invites you to lay that burden down, to let the weight of everyone else's mistakes stop defining your path forward. There is freedom here, but it doesn't demand forgiveness before you're ready. It simply asks you to don't let the past dictate the rest of the story. You're still here, still growing, and that's not just survival, that's strength. What you endured is part of your history, but it's not the whole story. You may have felt emotionally uprooted, either from a relationship, a community, or a version of life you once believed in. The Four of Wands reversed shows a disruption in stability and something that felt like home being lost, changed, or revealed as less secure than it seemed. There's disappointment here. Maybe a bond you thought would last but didn't. Maybe the space you tried to call home became unrecognizable, or maybe you realized that the foundation you were building on didn't actually reflect your truth. This isn't failure, it's evolution, and it's okay if part of you still mourns the fantasy of what could have been. You're allowed to grieve the idea of home, even if that idea was never real. You're allowed to want celebration and connection and belonging, and to feel the sting of its absence. What this card wants to remind you is that real stability doesn't come from clinging to broken structures. It comes from building something honest, even if it takes longer. This reversal is asking you to redefine home on your terms. Not the one someone else promised, not the one that only looked good from the outside, but the one that holds you, your peace, your voice, and your safety. That's the foundation that can't be shaken, and you are closer to it now than you've ever been. You didn't lose your sense of belonging, you're in the process of reclaiming it. The message closes with a deep breath. The Four of Swords speaks to rest, reflection, and the recovery of mental peace. You've been moving through emotional waves, internal battles, and shifting identities, and now you're being asked to pause, to listen, and to rest not just physically, but spiritually. This isn't about stepping away forever, it's about pulling back to realign, to stop performing healing and actually let it happen. You don't need to prove how strong you are right now, you just need to be. Be still, be quiet, and compassionate with yourself. In the silence, you'll hear more than you expected. You'll feel pieces of yourself returning, thoughts becoming clearer, emotions softening, and the exhaustion you've been carrying wasn't just physical, it was the weight of holding yourself together for too long, and now you're being told it's okay to exhale. You are not broken, you are recovering, and sometimes the most powerful choice is not action, but rest. This card is a reminder that clarity and peace often come after the noise fades, and that you're finally reaching that place where the storm is settling. Let this be your invitation to slow down, tune in, and trust the healing you've been seeking is already beginning within you. So that's what I'm getting for pile 1. If this resonated for you, please let me know in the comments, and of course, like and subscribe. See you next time. Hello pile 2, welcome to your reading. Let's jump right into it. This message opens with a reflection on what you've built and what you're still trying to believe is possible. The Foundation and Achievements card speaks to milestones, legacy, and the core pillars that make a life feel not just successful, but secure. And for you, this message is coming through now because it feels like part of your emotional foundation has been shaken recently. You may have been questioning what's truly stable in your life. What parts of your structure are actually built on truth, and what might be more fragile than you realized. This card carries the energy of someone who's done the work, who's pushed forward through heaviness, and who's still standing, but maybe wondering if they're allowed to stop and feel proud of what they've survived. There's a quiet resilience in your energy, but also a tension, like you're waiting for the next thing to fall apart. This message comes now to remind you that while not everything is perfect, you have achieved more than you've given yourself credit for. And not just in material ways, emotionally too, you've grown, you've evolved, and it's okay to acknowledge that. This card also opens the door to reflection, not just about where you've been, but where you're headed, and whether what you're building now actually aligns with who you are, or if you've been constructing a life around expectations that no longer fit. It's time to recheck that blueprint. You don't have to tear it all down, you just have to make sure your foundation still reflects you, not the version of you that played it safe, but the one that's ready to expand. This card reveals a tender part of you that's been feeling shut down or ignored. The Page of Cups reverse suggests emotional suppression, either a struggle to express how you really feel, or an experience where your vulnerability wasn't received with care. There's something you may have kept quiet about, a hurt, a hope, or an apology you never got. It feels like your inner child is still holding on to something unspoken. Maybe you reached out and were met with silence. Maybe you hoped for someone to meet you with softness, and they showed up cold instead. And now the part of you that wants to feel safe being open is sitting further in the background than it used to. This card is asking you to come back to that part of yourself, to give voice to what you buried. You don't have to share it with the world. This isn't about exposure. It's about acknowledgement. That there was a moment where you needed tenderness and you didn't get it. That matters, and it deserves space. You may also be second-guessing your emotional instincts, wondering if you cared too much, spoke too soon, or read into something that wasn't real. But the truth is, your emotions weren't the problem. The way you received them was. And the regret, if any, shouldn't be in what you offered, but in how it was misunderstood or mishandled. Let yourself return to your emotional self, the one that dreams, that feels deeply, and that speaks from the heart. You don't have to hide it anymore, especially not from yourself. This card brings in themes of self-worth, recognition, and the feeling of not being fully seen. The Six of Wands reverse suggests that you've been working hard, trying to move forward, but still feel unseen. Like your efforts haven't translated into the acknowledgement or success you'd hoped for. It might be external, it might be a project that didn't take off, a relationship where you weren't appreciated, or a goal that didn't manifest the way you envisioned, but it's also internal. You may be holding on to a story that says, maybe I'm not enough, just because the outcome didn't match your effort. This card is not here to validate the story, it's here to rewrite it, because recognition doesn't always show up right away. And sometimes, the ones who shine the brightest are the ones who had to grow in the dark first, in silence, without praise, and without applause. That's where you've been, and it's shaped more than you know. There's also a caution here about seeking too much of your self-worth from others. If you've been waiting for validation, hoping that someone or something would finally confirm your value, this message is your reminder that worth isn't granted, it's reclaimed, and it's already within you. You don't have to prove yourself anymore. You just have to stop questioning what's already true, that you are worthy, regardless of who's clapping. Here is where the energy begins to ground itself. The King of Pentacles brings in stability, maturity, and a quiet sense of mastery. This card represents someone who is rooted, who understands the long game, and who doesn't need external flash to feel secure in who they are. And this message is telling you that you are becoming that person, even if you don't fully feel it yet. You've been through enough to understand that real security comes from within, that consistency, integrity, and patience are more valuable than instant gratification. And whether this applies to your career, your relationships, or your sense of self, the message is clear. You are entering a more stable version of yourself. But that doesn't mean the journey is over. In fact, this might be the part where you start to build a more conscious, deliberate way, not just reacting to life, but shaping it. There's a strong message here about trusting your instincts when it comes to what you're creating. You don't have to rush, you just have to stay grounded. You might also be stepping into a role where others look to you for leadership, consistency, or emotional steadiness. And you're more than equipped for that than you realize. Just remember that strength doesn't mean perfection, it means being present, and you are. You're not becoming the King of Pentacles, you already are, and now it's time to live like you believe it. This card uncovers the inner resistance that's been slowing your progress. Judgment reversed reveals a moment of hesitation, a reluctance to fully step into your truth because of past guilt, fear, or uncertainty. It feels like you're hovering near a breakthrough, but not quite crossing the threshold. Maybe you've been waiting for a sign or a permission, or for the perfect moment to arrive, but this message is telling you that moment is now. The clarity you need isn't going to come from outside. It's already whispering inside of you, asking you to listen. This card also speaks of self-forgiveness. You might be holding on to past choices, missed chances, or times when you feel like you could have done better. And while reflection is powerful, too much of it can turn into stagnation. You're not who you were then, and judging yourself by the standards of an old version of you only keeps you stuck. This is a call to answer, not from the world, but from your own soul. The part of you that knows it's time to step up, to speak out, to claim your path. You don't need to be perfect, you just need to be present, and brave enough to choose what's real over what's familiar. It's time to rise, even if it's slowly, and even if you're still afraid. This final card brings a sense of renewal through connection. The Three of Pentacles is all about collaboration, community, and building something with others who genuinely value your contribution. After all this self-reflection, this card reminds you that you don't have to do it all alone. You're entering a phase where the right people, those who respect your growth, your ideas, and your essence, will start to show up. And if they're already around you, this is a call to lean in, to let yourself be supported, and to let others contribute to your vision, even if it's vulnerable or feels risky. This card also speaks to purpose. You may have talents or gifts that you've been hiding, downplaying, or waiting to be perfect before sharing it. But collaboration doesn't require perfection. It just requires presence. And showing up with what you have now is more than enough. You're not meant to stay in isolation. The internal work you've done is meant to translate outward into projects, relationships, or roles that reflect your evolution. And the universe is aligning the people and paths that will make the next step possible. Let yourself be a part of something again, not to prove your worth, but to share it. So that's what I'm getting for pile 2. If this resonated for you, please let me know in the comments, and of course, like and subscribe. See you next time. Hello pile 3, welcome to your reading. Let's jump right into it. The reading begins with a powerful emotional truth. Something in your current or recent experience has been deeply shaped by fear. The Trapped in Fear card suggests you've been stuck in your mind, possibly replaying past outcomes, worst-case scenarios, or intrusive thoughts that keep pulling you away from your center. What's important here is that this fear feels internalized, like a cage built not from reality, but from belief. You might be holding yourself back from something your heart deeply wants. It could be a conversation, a step forward, or a moment of healing or intimacy, but the fear around it has been louder than the desire, and you haven't been sure of how to quiet it. It's exhausting to want something and fear it at the same time, and this message is finding you because you're finally starting to notice just how loud that inner conflict has become. This isn't about shame. You're not weak or broken for hesitating. Fear often masks itself as logic or self-protection. It convinces you that staying small is safer, that not speaking is smarter, and that avoiding pain is strength. But fear isn't your guide. It's just a symptom of something deeper asking to be seen. The truth, you're not stuck. You're just paused, waiting for the moment where the belief that you deserve more becomes louder than the fear that you don't. And that moment is closer than you think. This reading is here to shine a light on what's holding you back and to remind you, fear only holds power when it remains unnamed. You're ready to name it, and once you do, its grip will begin to loosen. This card confirms the message of being stuck in your own mental web. The Eight of Swords reveals that the barriers around you are more psychological than physical. These could be self-imposed restrictions, doubts, or assumptions that are keeping you from acting. There's a feeling of being trapped, not because there's no exit, but because you can't yet see the way out. You might be caught in a loop. What if I get hurt again? What if I fail? What if I'm not ready? These questions feel real, but they aren't facts, they're just fears. And this card shows that the key to freedom isn't out there somewhere. It's in your ability to shift your perception and to loosen your grip on the story that you're powerless. You may be avoiding a conversation, a decision, or even a part of yourself that feels hard to face. And while you might not feel brave right now, This card is a reminder that clarity begins with acknowledgement. You don't have to know every step. You just have to recognize that you can choose differently. That movement is still available to you. Sometimes the hardest chains to break are the invisible ones, the patterns you inherited, the rules you didn't know you were following, and the beliefs you've been carrying that were never yours to begin with. This card gently asks, which beliefs are still serving you, and which ones are just keeping you stuck? Because the moment you begin to challenge those old voices, you start to free yourself. Here we see a deep connection. The Two of Cups represents mutual respect, emotional closeness, and the possibility of a meaningful partnership, romantic or otherwise. For many of you, this may reflect a connection that's already present, one that's been on your mind, or one that's energetically lingering in your heart space. This card suggests that love, in its truest form, wants to come in. But you've been stuck in fear. It makes sense why this energy has felt more distant than close. You may be holding back from emotional reciprocity, not because it's unavailable, but because part of you questions if you can truly receive it. There's a longing here, but also a wall. This card brings a reminder that real connection asks for vulnerability, and that can feel terrifying if your past has taught you to protect your heart at all costs. But this energy isn't here to harm you. It's here to show you that trust, softness, and intimacy can exist again. Not in the absence of fear, but alongside the courage to move through it. If someone is on your mind, or you're feeling the pull of closeness again after a long period of distance, know that this card is not a coincidence. Something real wants to find you, but it can only reach you if you stop running from the part of you that believes you're worthy of being met fully. Love isn't the reward for healing. Sometimes love is the healing. This card introduces tension, possibly internal, possibly relational. The Five of Wands is the energy of conflict, comparison, miscommunication, or feeling like you're in constant resistance. Whether it's a dynamic with someone specific or an internal war between your head and your heart, this card shows that things have felt chaotic and peace has been hard to come by. You may be feeling like everything is a struggle lately, like you're fighting to be understood, fighting to be seen, fighting to just feel grounded again. But here's the nuance. Not all of that conflict is external. Some of it is rooted in expectations you've been trying to meet or roles you've been trying to play that don't actually fit you anymore. There could also be competition, not necessarily with others, but with a past version of yourself. Maybe you feel like you should be further along by now, or you're comparing your healing, your success, and your timeline to others, and it's draining your energy. This card reminds you, growth isn't a race, and peace doesn't arrive when you win, it arrives when you stop fighting everything. This card isn't saying you're wrong to feel frustrated, it's just offering a reframe. What if the fight isn't against the world, but with the pressure you've placed on yourself? What if the peace you want is on the other side of permission, to slow down, to choose differently, and to not prove anything to anyone? You're allowed to stop fighting and start choosing what actually nourishes you. This is the moment in the reading where your inner resilience comes into focus, not as toughness or endurance, but as tenderness. The reverse strength card says you've been doing so much holding it together that you may have lost sight of what it feels like to simply be. You've been strong for so long, possibly for others, possibly to survive, but strength without softness becomes a weight, and you're being asked to set it down. You don't have to keep pushing through. You don't have to keep pretending you're fine. This card tells you it's okay to need support, to rest, to feel scared, and to admit that you're tired. True strength doesn't deny weakness, it holds space for it, and that's where your healing begins now. You might also be judging yourself harshly for not being better by now. Maybe you think you should have been over something or handling life with more grace, but that kind of self-pressure only distances you from gentleness that's actually needed. You're not behind, you're human, and this moment, this very message, is a call to release that impossible standard you've been carrying. You don't need to prove your strength anymore, it's already in you, and now it's time to let that strength be a container for care, not just for others, but for yourself. The softness you've been withholding is the very medicine you need. We close with the Five of Pentacles, a card that speaks to abandonment, scarcity, or the fear of being left out in the cold. It suggests that you may be carrying a wound of not being chosen, not being supported, or being emotionally disconnected from something or someone important, and that wound still lives in your emotional body. Whether this pain comes from the past or something ongoing, it's made you guard yourself. You may have convinced yourself you don't need help or that asking for comfort is weakness, but this card is here to say you are not a burden. You are not too much. You are not too late. What you need is valid, and it's okay to admit that you're still healing from feeling unseen. This card also carries a message of hope. Often when we feel the most abandoned, we're closer than we think to finding our way back to connection, both with ourselves and others. But it starts with the willingness to name what's been lost, and to believe that being held is still possible. You're being guided out of the cold, slowly maybe, gently, definitely, but you are not meant to carry this loneliness forever. This message has found you now because you're on the edge of choosing a different story, one where love, warmth, and belonging are still available. Let yourself be found. You don't have to walk through this alone anymore. So that's what I'm getting for pile 3. If this resonated for you, please let me know in the comments, and of course, like and subscribe. See you next time.